The story or the narrative or the character description that we have about ourselves is very important. Most times, the average person who's just going about in life as a young child assumes they are a child and then assumes they are a teenager, assumes they are a student, assumes they are the nation they build in, the culture they build in, and this is the underlying story print that is acting within the consciousness of these individuals. But what happens when that is not the real truth? That was an outside entity narrative that was instilled onto the minds of the individual. You can call it either awakening or the matrix hat or being born again or the mind being renewed. But when one does inward search, knowing thyself, awakening their inner spirit, they come to the realization and the truth. And it's either predetermined or chosen beyond time, or it was always the case and you are susceptible to this idea entering in your mind that you are in fact a child of God. And why does this come at a very important state? Because when one is a billionaire or a millionaire, they walk with a certain wind behind their backs are straight, they walk with confidence, and the confidence and the energy and the faith is what the system constantly brings out of you and drains out of you. In my own personal stance, I can sense and I observe and I purposely put myself in certain situations where I can see where and around who I feel confident around, who drains the energy that I naturally have, and it comes from each individual, which comes through God and which comes through source, and what kind of thought patterns, what kind of thinkings of others, what kind of projections that others would instill onto you, which drains you, because then that becomes the story, that becomes the narrative you start believing in yourself. But in that sense, when you understand you're a millionaire or a billionaire, even if it's a secret millionaire or a billionaire, you have that certain confidence in you. You walk with pride, you walk with a certain level of knowing what you are capable of and what you are worth in this materialistic world. Now, let's say you were always born a child in the old ancient days of a ruler, of a king, and you knew you were a prince and you were going to own a kingdom. You would be raised not just because of your raised level, your most people nowadays in the modern world live like kings did back in the days, or even better, even if they were called middle class or lower class. It's not the living standard, it's the knowledge, it's the story that's written on your mind that tells you that you are a prince, you are soon to be a king, you are of royalty, which gives you a certain level of knowledge about yourself, certain level of essence to you. Now, when you understand that when you are a child of God, which each individual is, when they get adopted into that concept, when they understand who died for them, who adopted them into the family, and you accept all this through inward knowledge, or yes, through self awareness, it brings you a certain level of knowing that you truly are more powerful, more spiritually, and more essentially important than what this world has told you or what you've told yourself due to how this storytelling that the world has given you. And when you understand that, it changes you, it renews your mind, it gives yourself a different level of self worth. It makes you think about life in a different way, it makes you move and act a certain way. And this comes to the concept of loving all things, because when one says in this calm modern day and age, where it's being propagated beyond means that you must love all things and loving everything is the way to be, there is some truth to that. But the very act of thinking to yourself and consciously saying that I am going to love all things is not in fact love. Someone has sold the idea of what love is to the persons, to the groups that assume that what they're doing is love, when in reality they're just playing out a role, and the people that sold that idea to them might have more devious intentions behind the scenes. The only way to truly be the sense of loving all things is if your nature is your consciousness, the river that you live out of or operate out of is a river of loving. So it's not that you consciously choose to be loving, it's whatever your nature is, that is what throws out. That is the essence, that is the fragrance of the flower that you are, rather than you're consciously choosing this is how I must act, this is how I must not act, this is the loving way, this is the not loving way. Because if we take it in terms of a child who wants candy at 12 o'clock at night, or a child who is about to do something that is detrimental to its health, detrimental to its own sake, A loving parent would discipline that child. A loving parent will tell it the truth because that is the fact of the matter. But the current way of love all things would allow the child to do whatever they want because they don't want to discourage the child. They don't want to give it some bad intentions. They don't want to hurt their feelings. And that is how this false idea of loving all things come about. Because it must not be a conscious choice. It must not be a narrative, a story that we believe that we are doing or we should be, but it's the very essence, the very state of who we are, that we are in ourselves a loving, kind, caring person, that we don't have a change of heart for a certain scenario. We don't have a change of heart for certain situations or people, but this is just who we are, and who we are is the fragrance that comes out. Others that observe it, others that see it, might look at it and say, that is the actions of someone that is operating on the frequencies of love. That is someone that's operating through good heartedness rather than the actions itself being described as loving. Now, if you look at it in the opposite spectrum, the thing called hate, most assume hatred is a word being described to an actions towards other people, either it be judgmental or negative connotations or things that go against what others want to be true or others want to be allowed. But real hate is a certain energy, is a certain essence, is a certain feeling that one has. And that feeling comes up, if you really want to go to the basics of it, when you stub your toe on the corner of a stool or a bed. That hatred that comes in you, or that energy and that anger that comes in you, that's directed towards that little thing that hurt your toe, that in itself is hatred. It is then transpired as frustration and anger, aggression, but you do have a sense of hatred towards that inanimate object. And the only reason that exists is because most people will say hatred is not something that they have. It just comes up when they react to something. But in reality, the only reason it comes up because it's in your nature, in its sense. That hatred has never left you. It's just covered up with a lot of platitudes, a lot of ideas, a lot of concepts. But in the real matters, when something or when things become important, when your sense of control is loosened and real life hits you hard, your true essence sneaks up on you, pops up on you. We try to give ourselves excuses saying, well, this isn't really hatred. I'm not really a hateful person. I'm just reacting to a situation that really hurt me or that threw me off guard. But in those matters, in those times, is when we truly see the true self of who an individual is and how they operate. And that is why we must always do this thing called knowing thyself, knowing what our reactions are, knowing what our traumas are. And in knowing these things, we can transcend whatever narrative, whatever story that we've been told about ourselves in order to be the person that we are. Most people do not think that change happens drastically. They think they're playing a narrative. The teenage age is, this is how I'm supposed to act. Then adult, then I start a career, then I'm in the middle age, and then I'm an older age, and there's a certain way to be, certain maturity, certain essence about you based on this age gap, based on this maturity, based on the situation of your life. And that drastic change cannot happen over time because society in itself doesn't allow it. There's a lot of negative connotations, a lot of negative influence from all around, those that are still asleep, or that those that like having people that they can control, or like a certain image about you in their minds. And when that image changes, they cannot handle it. And if you're still in the same vicinity and you haven't grasped your own authority, you haven't grasped your own independence and sovereignty, those energy fields, those thought patterns, those other beings might start to influence you back into a lower paradigm, a lower essence. That is why it's very important that when you're on this rise, when you're on this awakening, and thankfully or unthankfully, I myself, having gone through all these experiences, observing it, learning it, making these videos would help those in the future who are going to be going through these same awakening stages. And it's going to be happening for everyone, especially in this age of Aquarius, this enlightenment age, where most people are becoming self-aware. They're not letting their trauma, they're not letting their unconscious biases and unknowing trigger points activate them and be their true character. Rather, they're going to find out what it is their whole life has really been about, why they live, why they breathe, what is the purpose of it all. It might have a climatic shift in your reality and completely throw you off guard, especially for those that want to do it themselves and go through all the hardships, completely purge and detox from the world so they can get a clear mind, which sometimes some people need to do in order for them to really align with what it is their understanding is and what it is they're discovering for themselves. But usually, those individuals, thankfully, then make videos about their own experiences, bring it to the forefront so others can understand what kind of evolutions and changes they're going through. So it's not such a rock hard or such a harsh change in their own existence. Hopefully, these videos that I'll be making soon in the future and these current ones assist others and they bring a bit of positivity, bring a bit of goodness in their life, make their ride a little bit more simpler. Now, as I said in my earlier video, I have always been a certain seeker, a certain detached level of observation awareness. So when that rise took place, first, I would say personally, it was an interest. It was a way of going into different health matters, going into natural health. I tried the alkaline diet, which is something people might want to check out. It might not be for everyone, but it makes a lot of sense. It removes the mucus in the body and it gets very, very healthy state of living, and you get a little bit more conscious. I did feel much more in tune with higher frequencies, more essence, feel a lot lighter, feel a lot heavier, sleep very lightly, wake up with full energy at 5 o'clock in the morning. With the rise of the sun, you connect back with natural resources. Also, a little bit of grounding, which gets you the national energy, a little bit of sun spotting as well. And this sun spotting, this wasn't done by any research on my end or any videos I've searched. I like to ponder on things, I like to question things. And one day, the idea came to me, what is it that the sun, which gives energy and life to almost everything on this planet, except for human beings, why is it the human being needs to wear sunscreen or else they get sick, dying, even though the sunscreen gives them cancer in itself? And also, why is it that the eye, which pretty much other than the mouth and intake of food, is the only other internal intake of all life around us through observation, why is it they say that we should not be observing the sun? Why would it not give us the same level of energy? Why would it not activate the same level of concepts? So for some time, I also did the earthing, the alkaline diet, and also the intake through sun spotting, and all of it worked out very well, raised my intentions, raised my frequencies, energies, observations. It clears your mind and gives you a sense of strong will. Now, I think that's a very important thing to have in human essence and is very undervalued as a human being, especially in this society, the essence of will. And I think you can train it to be stronger. You can become aware of it. You can not be pressured by the outside world when you have this strong will. Because when I was on that certain vibration, when I was certain rising and the will was increased, I was able to switch my diet overnight. I was able to cut off a lot of things, yes, by the pure thought of do I want to do it, and it happened right away. Now I have done some experiments over time to see, because of intuition, because of concept of things like a handshake. Most of us in the Western world, we take handshakes for granted. We assume through habitual understanding this is what needs to be done. This is what we have to do when we meet someone, and if we don't do it, there's an awkwardness to it. But I wondered why. Why do I shake hands? Why do I do props? Is there a purpose to all of it? Or is it just a physical, habitual, robotic action that the mind automatically taps into when it meets someone else and it doesn't even think about it? And yes, by that thought alone, and because my frequencies were high, my will was strong enough that it did not care about the outside world and how it might react to it, that I decided I am going to stop shaking hands because it doesn't make sense to me. Now, obviously, there's a little pushback to it. Obviously, there's the Mr. Smith reaction, if you can call it, or the human beings who have always been so used to reacting a certain way. All of a sudden, if that same reaction isn't happening, there is some sort of disconnect, there is a little questioning, there is wondering why this is going on, there's some weirdness. But when you're on that cleansing, when you're on that detoxing, and you're capable of doing it, and it matters with your diet, your health, your earthing, and all these other things that naturally come to one, it helps you. Or else that pressure from society, and you do get a lot of pressure from society to yes say, you know what, I'm just going to be shaking people's hands. There's no point of even doing this, even though you internally truly want to. Something inside you tells you that this is what you must do, because it's a learning experience. The same way someone goes and joins a sport or learns a skill, increasing your will, testing, questioning things is also very important, so you understand who you are and where you come from. These are the things that naturally happen now in this current moment as I'm recording this. Through my journey, through my state, you can call it higher value or lower value, but I am not currently at that certain level of health, certain level of grounding, certain level of pure intuitive understanding and sense I was back then. Now, I'm still trying to wonder, ponder on, was it a natural rise in the consciousness of humanity, natural rise of this being, or was it purely based on the diet, the sun gazing, and the earthing, which allowed one to have such a high faith value, high frequency, a movement, almost like the wind is beyond your back and you can accomplish anything and nothing can stop you. Obviously, it's the natural rise that also gives you that essence. And when you purge all the negative energies around you, it helps with that. But you have to ask, was it also assisted by a certain time in one's life, a certain time in the era that it allowed one to get that way? And now there is a lowering period, like the waves of alpha whale, beta male, it goes up and down, up and down. And maybe there's another rise coming up in the soon future. We will observe that and I will report back to you. That being said, this handshaking is a little minimal thing. Then the other times, and this is more on the spiritual experience end, there was a moment for about a month that I stopped speaking. Now, I didn't stop speaking, yes, verbally, it was also the internal monologue was also turned off. Where did this idea come from? I have not figured that out yet, but it was a concept, it was a questioning to see who is it that controls my reality or my direct environment? Is it me, or can I choose something that is completely out of the norm that dictates my reality, my existence, my sovereignty? And that pondering of that questions brought about the state, maybe I'll be quiet, maybe I won't speak. Luckily, I was in a certain type of job at that time, which allowed me to be able to do that, not so permanently with the little issues here and there, but it allowed me to go around with it. And by doing so, it brought about more insights about the state of other human beings that I've talked about when they give up a certain sense, when they give up a certain major aspect of their life. Other things are heightened, their knowledge is awakened, certain awarenesses, certain intuitiveness comes about. And I did sense that as I was silent, as I separated myself to reacting to whatever people were saying, because most times people are not speaking their truth, they're not saying their essence. What they're doing is reacting to words that another individual has spoken, and they assume that them, the ego, the essence, is reacting to the words rather than taking in what was just said, what was heard, and then speaking on it, and it happens to be heard by the individual that was speaking to them. Because there is a big difference between speaking at someone, speaking to someone, and yes, speaking your truth. Now, when you're speaking your truth, it comes from your river, it comes from your ocean of your being, rather than just the quick back and forth conversations amongst two individuals who technically are not speaking their truth, but they're just having a conversation based on words, based on interactions. Not sure if it's being explained properly in this one, but there is a difference in the way that communication happens. So as I did this silence thing, the separation amongst humanity, the separations amongst oneself and the beings around them was made a little bit more clear, and it did have a separation. Then it brought into the inside those that lose their eye, or those that give up their left eye or go blind, how their intuition, how their awarenesses, how their senses are heightened. And when one chooses without losing it, but when one chooses for themselves to do such a thing, to self-regulate, self-question, self-block a certain natural necessity of life that we think is necessity, what really happens, what can change, what can increase. And these are the things I'm sure those that have awakened all throughout human society have experienced, have gone through, have understood. And that is why some people choose for the rest of their life to either put their hand up forever or live as a monk in a monastery forever, totally exclude themselves from all human society, because it does bring a certain level of peace, certain level of assurances, certain level of understanding. I personally, on my end, do choose the hermit life. It is more peaceful, but I haven't figured out how to go about it in this modern day society, yes, as of yet, because I sense with the big shift and change that is taking place, there do needs to be some people that understand the bigger picture that might assist others when the time comes. So it has to be juggled, or it has to be balanced back and forth. But the prime goal eventually will be to set up a situation where one can be completely detoxed, one can have complete serenity in the mind state, and as well help others. Unfortunately, right now, India, Philippines, and those kind of locations seem to be the only place for those kind of individuals that become very spiritually awakened. And that is the pull. I believe it might be a false pull, but that is the pull that most have when they start awakening, that India somehow is more mystical, somehow has more spiritual essence, so we have to travel there. But I think it's more of, yes, the setup of the old ancient culture that used to exist, that permeates, that promotes, and that assists in this type of behavior, rather than in the Western world where it's seen more as some sort of deviancy from natural living life and capitalism and family and working and slaving away. So when one becomes awakens and wants to be a hermit, there's something wrong with that person. These are the false ideas that different sides of the world, different cultures have come about. But once again, like I said, when you have that strong will essence, which I think can be trained into a population, which can be trained into a society, yes, by the detoxification, by the sun spotting, and I'm sure each being, each individual has their own little intuition that comes to them when they go through that state, that when they have these moments, it does make about a better, easier way to do the things that one needs to do to detox, because each individual, I do believe, needs complete expulsion from all the things that they know are normal, that they know are true, so that they can find themselves. But the problem is they create such a fear tactic, they create such an attachment level to this thing called this narrative that we think we have to play out, and missing out on any one of these so-called narratives would be such a major catastrophe, and it would deviate from the future events that should take place after this prior event has taken place. And this is the way most human minds have been molded into assuming that life must go out, rather than truly is living in the moment, in the essence, enjoying it, and living your truth rather than the story truth that was sold to people. So to round up on this video, detoxification, grounding, sun spotting, a strong will. I believe it is one of the most powerful things in a human being and in the human consciousness, which they have slowly taken out, this essence of will, this essence of being able to do something out of nowhere and completely changing everything in a split second moment, which would help with a lot of drug addiction, smoke addiction, drinking addiction, bad habits, eating habits. All this can be changed in a matter of second, but it is told to people, it is assumed on to people that it's something you have to work on, it's something that takes over time, when in reality it's a complete shift in the way the mind thinks, and then the very next day it becomes very easy, very simple. I'm hoping as these videos go, as the viewership increases, as the knowledge is spread amongst those that are also seeking, and the universe, the internet has a way of sending videos to those that are looking for the right things at the right time somehow, that these videos meet the right set of ears, the right set of minds, and then a collaboration, a get together, a connection can happen, where as of right now, from where I used to be, I'm completely excluded from those that you would consider spiritually awakened, spiritually understanding of the bigger picture of things, because it is a more of a materialistic life. Now, I'm still in my current journey, wondering if this was God's plan, and learn certain understanding of how the upper levels of life and how the more materialistic, lower vibrations of life can affect one's being, so that I may be a light, so that I may speak onto these things for future generations, for future ones that go through this certain journey. Because at the end of the day, us, our egos, our essence, our story in life is irrelevant. as the famous saying goes. We are like grass and flowers. We get cut and disappear, and new ones are grown. Our view on ourselves is way beyond what the truth is. Our true existence is of a human being, is of human consciousness. Everything we learn, everything we experience is for one sake or one set, our own benefit, our own living, our own experience. But it is to be used and to be shown to others, like few have commented, being the light, being the candle that spreads this light to the other individual who then grows upon it, who learns upon it. Because most individuals, as I have been too, I had to work a lot to be able to fake a conversation and being recording. It's unfortunate I wasn't able to record things sooner on as I was on that rise, as I was on that higher awakened situations. Maybe it was because of the detox of all radio signals, of all cell phone signals, which also assist in the rising of awakening, because these cell phones do drain your energy on a conscious and spiritual level that we do not understand yet, which is why most people are so stuck, so ingrained into it. It is not just social media, but the very cell phone itself steals your energy. But when I was on that rise, I would have been able to explain things more. It would have been motivating. You would have felt that high energy. Now I still have that awareness, that consciousness, that wind behind the back that used to be there isn't there as usual. Now this could be just a casual time of the life cycle situation, or it could be the environment, it could be the energy, it could be the material, it could be the other beings of energy harvesting sources. But these will all be understood, these will all be studied, because almost everything in your life is an experience. One sees it as a good thing, as a bad thing, as a positive thing, as this is what I want to happen, this is not what I want to happen. But those very thoughts of this is what I want, this is not I want, prevents us from fully experiencing all the things of life. It does get difficult, it does get hard, but knowing faith, or having faith, knowing that there is a bigger picture at play, there is a bigger opportunity, there is a bigger grandiose final moment that it is all coming to, that will give people hope. That is what the system on some level prevents people from having. That is why they constantly push the negative aspects of life. And that is why this new change of narrative, this new positivity, this new awakening that's happening will be good for those to be more encouraged to know that they can take some time to themselves, they can understand themselves, they can increase their spirituality. I say the word spirituality, but once again, these are catchphrases, these are spell casting words. Everyone has their own way of explaining this, their own way of describing it. Frequencies, energy, source, awakening, godliness, born over again, touched, all these other things do come into effect. Every culture, every experience, every background brings one to describe it in a different way, but it is happening all throughout the world. It has been happening for a very long time, but this peak moment is the most important, most vital, as it would seem, especially with the things happening all around the world. Global affairs, politics is connecting to spirituality, is connecting to fortune telling, to prophecy, and all these major things. And that is why even when the negative forces are around you, and this is for all those that are going through that hard times, when it feels like the world is around you, it's also about your imagination. It is how they want you to perceive how things are taking place, which can also negatively affect you. As long as you understand that no matter what happens, that life is a grander scale. You as an individual are a figment of your own imagination. There is a source to you, but the thing that keeps you attached to the storyline is your attachment to the things of this world, your attachment to your own self, your ownership, the materials, your relationships, your husbands, your wives, your kids, your mothers, your fathers. You think these attachments in your mind are real things in this world. And when something happens to you, or when something goes through a certain event, which you would call negative, that something is attacking your essence of life, when in reality it is just the attachment, the strong attachment that has been a little shaken up. And because it's shaken up, the reaction comes in and tells you that something negative is taking place, something bad, so you must feel bad about it. When in reality, you as a sovereign being, as an entity, are a complete individual, secluded completely cut off from the outside world. Now, yes, there are attachments. We are all connected through consciousness. There are people that see some people more closer than others, and these essence exist. But on the final, basic ground level, each living being is a living being unto themselves. But as a child, you know this, you understand this. That is why you're so easy to connect to other beings, because you're connecting on a spiritual understanding level. But over time, the family you're born into, the culture you're born into, the nature you're born into, imprints into you that you are this. This is your soul essence. This is where you look at life through. That means you've already internally divided the world between my things, my ownership, my world, and the outside world, which then I have to interact with. That divide in itself has already created the trauma segment, that has already created the problems that one has to overcome when they're interacting with the world. But if you understand that that is not the real thing, the real seclusion, the real separation is you as an individual being in itself, and everything else must be seen as an equal because you've gone into yourself, you've known thyself, you've seen the godliness within you, so you see the godliness within all other things. However, most do not ever attempt to go and seek and know those things, so they find security in the things of the known. They find security in the title and attachment of lover, title, attachment of family, title, attachment of child, mother, father, sister, school teacher, or the community. And this is my community, and therefore the outside community I will not feel safe in. These are concepts, ideas, programmings that are put into the mind, which give the mind, which is made to be scared, made to be alone, because it feels it is disconnected and belongs nowhere, so it finds a place to belong, and that becomes its crutch, that becomes its attachment, that becomes the anchor in which you see yourself through. And this is the natural basic format setup, but it should not be how things are actually viewed as. And once you can see past that, then you can cruise through life in a much more simpler way. That being said, that doesn't mean the monetary, the materialistic, and the interactions with the world will be smooth, as I have learned for myself. You cannot just fully give the truth to everyone, even though you hope you can, even though your free essence lovingness wishes it could. But some people do not react that way. Everyone has their own narrative that they play, everyone has their own frequencies. So you have to go base by base, situation by situation, and you learn from it. Now, when you're on that high, that spiritual high that you feel the wind is behind your back, God walks with you, there's nothing wrong you can do, anything that you hope to accomplish, and you do accomplish a lot, others will not see it, others will not understand it, but internally, for the story that you know that you've gone through a major shift. It is not for others to verify it or for others to give you that assurity, because that is how the system has been trained to make sure you gain your assurity and your knowing from the outside acceptance or the outside acknowledgement of the things that have gone through, and then it defeats your spirit, it lowers your vibration, gives you doubt, and these doubting concepts are then bringing you back down to a lower level of living. So do not fall for that trap, but at the same time know that most human beings are unaware of anything more than the basic level of TV land living. That is all they know, and they have given such great importance to it. And from their own insecurities, they will push that onto you and hope that you conform and hope that you go along with the story they believe, because that gives them assurances. Because anyone that deviates from that narrative, then the doubt goes into those that haven't taught for themselves, or those that like to be in control or like to be the authoritative figures. When they see others changing things up, it messes with their programming. It gives them doubt. It makes them wonder maybe there's more to life. And in order to avoid that question, in order to avoid that discomfort within themselves, they would rather put down those individuals that are breaking out of the herd, that are making something greater in human essence, understanding, and journey. And usually the ones that are capable of doing such journeys, of such wondering, of such breaking out of the herd, are either very meek, very acceptable, always looking to the outside world for some sort of verification, not in a negative way, but yes, because they're so unsure. And it is that unsureness that even got them onto that journey to begin with, because it is that unsureness, that doubting, that wondering, that pondering that makes one even interested in life, rather than just accept whatever people tell them that life is. So to finish it off, folks, detox, high energy, raise your things, and the belief system in itself. When they talk about chakras, when they talk about meditating, when they talk about building an energy field around you, there is some truth to it. Not just because you say you want to do it and you sit in silence. You have to mentally, in your mind, the most powerful, most imaginative thing in God's creation is the imagination and the visualization of things. Once you can visualize things over and over and over and over and over again and implant it into your mind, it does become reality. Even if it is not in this material world, in your mind it is, and that has way more effect than we understand. So when you visualize these things and you imagine it and you put it into existence, it does have a change over time, depending on how powerful the forces around you are, to the changes that are about to take place. So detox, increase your senses, go with your intuition, increase your will, and make sure that no matter what the other forces around you tell you, someone that talks down to you, someone that is unable to control themselves and wants control over you, they are probably not in the best interest. They might think they're doing it for your best interest, but in reality, it's from a sake of control, it's from a sake of downgrading, and it's the sake of making sure you don't escape their grasps. Once you see that, you respect them because most likely they have their own trauma that they need to deal with. They have their own essence. They haven't really understood things. You respect their way they feel. Do not push too hard on their boundaries because at that level, at that state of their interactions, you won't be able to talk reason to them anyway. But yes, no, every human being, no matter how close you think you are with someone, how connected you are with someone, they are on a completely different playing field than you are. And as the old saying goes, Jesus Christ did not come here to make friends, or did not come here. I had to go look it up. But he came here to separate mother and daughter, father and son, family from family, because when you get awakened to the truth, when you start rising, when you change, some people, even though they're the closest friend you've ever had, even though they've lived with you for years and years and years, even though they might have been your wife for eternity, when that shift happens, when that change happens, it completely changes your mind, your perspective changes. And when that happens, obviously you're a little doubtful, obviously you're a little questioning, and you might have doubts, and the outside world, in their ignorance, in their arrogance, are so firm in their knowing. They're so firm in the narrative that they never discovered, but they were told. They're firm, and their arrogance of that firmness might make you doubt, might make you question, but that is that negativity, that is that testing that's happening. Make sure to always overcome it and know that there's been many human beings that have gone through this over the ages, that have seen this, that have dealt with this, and that this happens throughout history over and over again. And you, as an individual that's rising, that's changing, that's breaking out of the mold, you are the ones that are usually the storybooks and the narratives and the hero movies are written about. But in real life, people assume those that do those things that are so different, so distant from the natural herd should be the bad ones, should be the ones that feel bad or feel ashamed or feel a little negative about or feel doubtful about. But in all reality, it's only because the control system is losing control, and it does not want its own narratives, it does not want its own ideas questioned for itself, so it always projects, it always puts it out to the other individual who's making them feel that way as a form of discouragement so that they don't always have to feel bad. And to leave it off on a high note, there is a mass in the age of Aquarius, a shift coming. Solar flares, as they say it, the universe, and black holes, they do send out an energy field, so it'll be more accustomed. Now the hippie era, as I said, was a natural thing that was taking place. You can always gravitate towards others that are going in this, and it's always good to be around like-minded, well-minded, same frequency people, especially in your beginning stages. Does not mean give up your entire life, ruin your credit, ruin your licenses, and all these other things, which certain individuals have to go through. I personally went through that entire steps myself. I learned from it, so now I'm sharing the wisdom and knowledge to other people. At a certain level, you don't really need this, depending on how far and wide you want to go into the hermit world. that option is still always available because you never know what life has to bring. But there's a way to take it in strides. There's a way to keep it just inwardly to yourself, because when that awakening happens, people get so excited. They want to share with the entire world, and they want to tell everyone to assume that everyone is going to be susceptible to it as much as you are. But it's always never that case. Usually the ones that are awakened just happen to find themselves in certain situations where there's a lot of doubtful Nancys or doubtful Davids, whatever the term is, and always have a doubtful essence about it, which might jolt you a little, which might make you question a little, but never let it enter your mind. You as a human being, things are happening to you, obviously not with the negative essence, but things are happening to you for a reason. Is to learn from, is to be spiritual on, is to raise your frequency, and it is something that's happening all throughout the world. It can be saying the renewal of the Christ consciousness, finding Jesus, the rising of the spirit, higher vibrations, the growing, the evolution of humanity's consciousness as itself. There's many names to it, but it's all happening naturally, and these are the futures of humanity. Those that are unable to question their own truths, those that are just robotically going through the motions of life, assuming in their own world that they are correct. These individuals are very firm in their understanding and very firm in their truths. So it's going to take a little bit more time because of that firmness for them to ever be introduced to it. Even if they've been introduced to it, they would have been believed so strongly, whether through trauma or whether, yes, through they're not ready. They're not the spirits, they're not the essence that are ready for that level of change in this lifetime. Maybe there might be another lifetime in their storyline for them to go through this process. So you never have to save anyone. That is not your role. It is the captain save a whole virus that always attacks, that always impedes one's growth. Everyone goes through it, but hopefully you hear this and you learn that being a captain save a whole hero is not your goal. It is never the good thing, because you're acting on urges rather than just being you, and that the very essence of being you will be the essence of saving another individual who's looking for a light, who's looking for a conversation, who's looking for another soul to communicate with.